Long ago, people living in igloos had to store food in smart and surprising ways. They didn't have ovens, fridges, or grocery stores, just snow, ice, and pure survival skills. What did they keep in their pantries to make it through the cold? Let's open the door and find out. Dried fish held a VIP spot in Arctic pantries, and not just because it was everywhere. In the icy north, where igloos stood tall and firewood didn't exactly grow on trees, dried fish was the go-to survival food. If Arctic life had a currency, this stuff would have made millionaires out of fishermen. Why was it such a big deal? First, availability. The Arctic waters were full of fish, even when other animals were hard to find. Hunting caribou or seals took skill, time, and a bit of danger. Fishing? Still tough, but at least you weren't going toe-to-toe with a creature that could bite back. And once that fish was caught, nature took over. The freezing air did the job of a modern freezer, fast and free. But freezing wasn't enough. Arctic families knew how to dry fish without using fire, which was rare and saved for more urgent needs. They'd hang fish in cold, dry air, letting the wind and time do the rest. This freeze-drying method turned fish into a lightweight, tough, and long-lasting food source. No fancy packaging, no preservatives, just smart, old-school prep. And they didn't just chew it like jerky. Dried fish was shredded, softened, cooked into soups, even mixed with fat or berries. Every bit was used, including the skin and bones. In tough times, tossing out any part of the fish would have been unthinkable. Arctic cooking may not have been glamorous, but it was clever and resourceful. On top of all that, dried fish packed serious nutrition. Loaded with protein, fat, and essential vitamins like D and B12, it gave people the energy to move, hunt, and stay warm in bitter cold. One bite could power a full day of work, or at least keep the frostbite from winning. And while dried fish handled the solid side of survival, next up is something that helped keep everything else from going bad, and lit up the igloo too. Seal oil was the Arctic's version of liquid gold, except instead of coming from sunny groves, it came from seals, and instead of flavoring fancy salads, it powered survival. Pulled from thick layers of blubber, this oil wasn't just food. It was light, heat, preservation, and energy all rolled into one. Getting it was smart and surprisingly low-tech. Arctic families didn't need a stove or a pot, just patience. Chunks of blubber were placed into containers made from animal stomachs. Over time, the fat would slowly melt at room temperature without needing a single flame. These stomach pouches were strong, flexible, and didn't leak. Thousands of years before plastic lids and pop-top jars, this was the go-to storage solution that worked in sub-zero weather. Seal oil had plenty of jobs. As food, it worked like a dipping sauce for dried meat and fish, adding much-needed fat and flavor. It turned tough meals into energy-packed dishes. As fuel, it was poured into stone lamps with moss wicks, burning through the endless Arctic nights and bringing heat and light into igloos. With firewood rare and sunlight even rarer, this was a big deal. Its role in food storage was just as important. Meat kept in seal oil could last 6 months or longer, protected from mold, decay, and freezing air. No icebox needed. In a world without refrigerators, seal oil helped stretch a good hunting season far into the next. And let's not forget nutrition. Seal oil was loaded with vitamins A, D, E, and K, plus plenty of omega-3 fats. All that good stuff helped bodies fight the cold and stay strong through brutal weather. One spoonful could fuel long hunts or cold treks across snowfields. As useful as it was, not everything in an igloo pantry was greasy or savory. Some Arctic foods added a surprise twist, sweet, colorful, and completely natural. Frozen berries, nature's candy of the north, added both vital nutrition and rare sweetness to the traditional Arctic diet. Finding berries in the Arctic is like discovering your grandmother's secretly stashed chocolate bars in the freezer. Unexpected joy in a barren place. Arctic berries weren't the plump, cultivated varieties found in supermarkets. They were wild, hardy plants that evolved to survive extreme conditions. Cloudberries, crowberries, blueberries, cranberries, and bearberries flourished during the brief summer months, storing concentrated nutrients in their small packages. These berries had to be tough to survive in the Arctic. They're basically the fruit version of people who swim in ice water for fun. The gathering of these berries was a crucial summer activity. When the snow melted, everyone would head out with containers made from animal bladders or birch bark to collect as many as possible. Nothing says quality family time like picking berries while keeping an eye out for hungry polar bears nearby. What made Arctic berries particularly valuable was their natural preservation ability. The quick onset of freezing temperatures meant berries left on bushes would freeze dry naturally, concentrating their sugars and nutrients. Mother Nature was running a berry preservation factory long before humans invented freeze-dried astronaut food. These naturally preserved berries could be collected throughout winter, plucked directly from bushes protruding through the snow. Rich in vitamin C, these berries provided essential protection against scurvy. Just 1 cup of crowberries contains about 45 milligrams of vitamin C, nearly 50% of the daily recommended intake. This vitamin content helped maintain health during long winters when fresh food was scarce. Some berries were kept frozen in natural ice cellars dug into the permafrost. Others were preserved in seal oil, creating a sweet-savory combination. Perhaps most interesting was mixing berries with animal fat and meat to create pemmican, a complete meal that wouldn't spoil for years. It was the original energy bar, just without the fancy packaging or questionable chocolate coating. Arctic berries weren't just eaten as snacks. They became ingredients in various traditional foods. Akutak, often called Eskimo ice cream, combined berries with rendered fat and sometimes fish to create a dessert-like treat packed with calories and nutrients. Probably the only ice cream in the world that could sustain life for a week if you got stranded with just a bowlful. While these colorful berries brought sweetness to Arctic life, sometimes survival required heartier sustenance, which brings us to the walking food source that kept northern peoples alive through countless generations. Caribou herds roamed the tundra in massive numbers, sometimes tens of thousands strong, creating a thundering parade of dinner possibilities. If fish were the everyday bread of the Arctic diet, caribou was the Sunday roast that everyone looked forward to. These magnificent creatures provided not just a tasty meal, but an entire shopping list of survival essentials. During summer hunts, Arctic hunters would track caribou during their migrations. Once killed, the animal became an immediate source of food, but smart hunters knew winter was always coming. They would carefully butcher the animal, separating different cuts for different purposes. Some meat would be eaten fresh, a celebration of the successful hunt. The rest would be prepared for storage using methods perfected over thousands of years. Large cuts were sliced thin and hung on racks to dry in the cold Arctic air. This natural dehydration process created what we might call caribou jerky today, though no modern beef jerky can match its rich, gamey flavor. The dried meat could last for months without spoiling and was lightweight enough to carry on hunting trips. Other portions would simply be frozen raw. Nature provided the perfect freezer. Just dig a hole in the permafrost or store it in a specially built ice cellar, and your meat stayed preserved until needed. But the true genius of Arctic food preservation was using every single part of the caribou. Nothing went to waste. The tongue was considered a delicacy. The brain was eaten for its high fat content. Even the stomach contents, partially digested plants, were sometimes consumed for their vegetable nutrients, which were otherwise hard to find in the barren Arctic landscape. The bone marrow, rich in fat and calories, was particularly prized. Breaking open caribou bones was like cracking nature's energy bars, except nobody complained about the packaging. Studies have shown that bone marrow can contain up to 786 calories per 100 grams, a true lifesaver during the harsh winter months when energy needs skyrocketed. The caribou's blood wasn't wasted either. It was collected and sometimes mixed with fat and berries to create a nutrient-rich pudding that could be frozen for later use. This connection between caribou and the blood pudding mentioned later shows how Arctic peoples created an interlocking food system where nothing was wasted. While dried fish might have been the everyday staple, caribou meat brought variety, essential proteins, and fats that kept Arctic communities thriving through the harshest conditions imaginable. They were basically walking grocery stores with antlers, and the next time you complain about carrying groceries home, just imagine dragging an entire caribou back to your igloo. Speaking of impressive food preservation, let's talk about something that might make your nose wrinkle, but keep Arctic people alive. Fermented walrus might just take the crown for most acquired taste in Arctic history, and maybe all of human history. But no matter how intense the smell, This bold dish helped people survive some of the toughest winters on Earth. When snow covered everything and fresh meat was nowhere to be found, fermented walrus was the fallback. Not pretty, not pleasant, but incredibly useful. Why walrus? Its meat was packed with fat, making it ideal for long-term storage. Unlike freezing, which preserved food quickly, fermentation was a slow process, but it had one big advantage. It worked without fire, without sunlight, and even without constant freezing temperatures. The process started by digging a pit, lined with stones, moss, or animal hides to keep things clean-ish. Big chunks of walrus meat were laid inside, sealed up with more hides and stones, and left to ferment. It wasn't a quick job. This took weeks or even months. Over time, bacteria went to work in the oxygen-poor environment, softening the meat, changing its flavor, and making it safe to eat for long periods. The smell? Oh, the smell. Fermented walrus released gases like hydrogen sulfide and trimethylamine, the same culprits behind rotten eggs and fishy stink. Opening one of these fermentation pits was an event. Not a fun one, but an important one. In fact, there's an old Arctic saying that if your food doesn't smell bad enough to make your eyes water, it's not done yet. Despite all that, the nutritional payoff was huge. A single pound of fermented walrus meat held around 1,500 calories, plenty of fat, and even probiotics, the same kind found in yogurt today. It wasn't just calories. It was gut health, energy, and survival fuel, all in one wild-smelling package. Some families skipped the pit and used sealskin bags instead, tucking them into rocky crevices or under moss to keep them cool and let the fermentation happen slowly and safely. It took skill and careful handling, but it worked. While fermented walrus was the break glass in case of emergency meal, the ocean still offered something a bit easier on the nose and a little more snackable. Long before health food stores were selling seaweed snacks for $8 a bag, Arctic families were gathering kelp straight from icy shorelines, and not for trendy diets, but for survival. This sea plant wasn't some last-minute option. It was a dependable source of nutrition in a land where vegetables didn't exactly grow on trees, or anywhere really. Kelp harvesting took place during low tide, when the sea pulled back just enough to reveal long, leafy strands clinging to rocks. Women and children often took the lead, carefully wading into freezing water to collect it. It was like grocery shopping if your local store was trying to freeze your toes off and occasionally smacked you with salty waves. Preserving kelp was refreshingly simple. No pits, no oil, no secret family techniques. After gathering, the kelp was rinsed and left to dry in the wind and sun. Thanks to its natural saltiness, it kept well for months without spoiling. Dried kelp was rolled into bundles tied up with strips of hide and either hung from the ceilings of igloos or tucked into sealskin bags for easy storage. What made kelp so important was what it delivered. It packed serious nutrition, especially calcium and iodine. In fact, a single ounce of kelp could offer up to 4,000% of your daily iodine needs. That's not a typo. In a place where dairy and leafy greens were unheard of, kelp stepped in to fill the gap. It wasn't typically eaten alone. Most of the time, dried kelp was chopped into soups or stews to add flavor and thickness. During tougher times, people would chew it like jerky, chewy, salty, and full of minerals. Some groups even fermented it in seal oil, creating a tangy topping that made plain meals taste a little less plain. Compared to fermented walrus, kelp was a breath of fresh air, or at least fresh ocean breeze. It brought balance to the pantry, offering nutrients from the sea while the skies above delivered something just as surprising. Arctic birds were the flying protein packages that helped Arctic communities survive when larger game was scarce. Unlike large mammals, birds offered smaller, more manageable portions of meat that didn't require complicated preservation. The most commonly hunted birds included ptarmigan, a chicken-sized bird that changes from brown in summer to snow white in winter, various geese and ducks during migration seasons, and even small songbirds when necessary. What made birds valuable was their year-round presence, with some species remaining in the Arctic even during harsh winters. Hunting techniques varied with the seasons. During summer, hunters might use bolas or nets stretched across narrow valleys. In winter, simple snares set along ptarmigan trails often yielded enough birds for a meal. Bird hunting was less glamorous than taking down a caribou, but there was less chance of being stomped to death, which most hunters considered a definite advantage. Once caught, birds needed minimal processing. The feathers were plucked, often saved for insulation and clothing, and the innards removed. Storage was brilliantly simple. Plucked birds were pushed into snowbanks, creating a natural refrigeration system that kept them frozen until needed. Birds offered nutritional benefits beyond protein. The liver and heart contained concentrated vitamins A and B that help prevent deficiency diseases. Bird eggs collected during spring provided a rare source of fresh food after long winters. A notable fact, bird meat contains approximately 25 grams of protein per 100 grams, similar to beef but with significantly less fat. This lean protein helped balance the extremely fat-rich diet from marine mammals. Retrieving dinner from your snowbank could be tricky. Honey, have you seen that bird I stored Tuesday? No, not Wednesday's bird, Tuesday's bird. While birds provided smaller packages of protein from the air, rendered fat from various animals offered concentrated energy. Rendered fat might sound fancy, but in the Arctic, it was everyday survival food. After catching seals or whales, hunters wouldn't waste the fatty parts. That would be like throwing away gold where calories equal life. The rendering process was simple, but needed patience. Hunters cut blubber chunks from marine mammals, then slowly heated them over a low flame. If you think waiting for microwave popcorn takes forever, try standing over melting blubber for hours. As the fat melted, it separated from tissue, creating a clear golden liquid poured into containers made from animal parts. Once cooled, this fat turned into solid blocks lasting months without spoiling. Many Inuit families stored up to 50 pounds to survive winter, about the weight of a 6-year-old child, but in pure energy. People wouldn't just eat it plain. A single tablespoon provided about 120 calories, perfect for extreme cold. Arctic explorers who turned their noses up at eating pure fat often found themselves with more frostbite than the locals who embraced the greasy goodness. Folks would dip dried fish into it, creating complete meals with protein and enough calories for ice fishing or hunting in freezing temperatures. Some mixed it with berries for a sweet, savory treat. Beyond eating, rendered fat waterproof boots and clothing. Though you probably wouldn't want to try this with your winter jacket unless you want to smell like last week's fish fry. Unlike the fermented walrus from earlier, rendered fat actually smelled decent when fresh. And speaking of storage, our next topic reveals a clever way to keep meat fresh using something you might walk right over without noticing. Moss-stuffed meat bags might not sound like a 5-star storage method, but in the Arctic, they were a clever fix long before Tupperware was a glint in anyone's eye. These low-tech meat preservers relied on a surprising natural material, moss. Not just any moss, though, sphagnum moss, which came with built-in antibacterial powers. This same moss was so effective at fighting infection that it was used as wound dressing during both world wars when supplies were scarce. If it could help heal soldiers, it could definitely help keep dinner from turning into a science experiment. To build one of these natural refrigerators, people would take an animal skin bag, often made from seal or caribou hide, then stuff the inside with dried moss. Meat went into the center, nestled like a baby bird in a leafy nest. The whole thing was then stored in a cool place, stone caches under snow or tucked into ice cellars. The idea probably raised eyebrows at first. You can almost hear the neighbors. There goes old Nanook, stuffing grass into his dinner again. But while their food rotted, his stayed fresh. Moss. 1, skeptics, 0. The secret lies in the moss's acidity. With a pH between 3 and 4, sphagnum moss creates an environment where spoilage bacteria struggle to survive. It also absorbs moisture and helps keep the inside of the bag at a consistent temperature. 2 more things that slow down decay. These bags didn't add flavor or nutrition like seal oil, but they bought time. When you're trying to stretch a hard-won piece of meat through an unforgiving winter, a few extra days could make a big difference. Of course, not all Arctic food needed to be hidden away in moss. Some of it was worth showing off, especially when the celebration fires were lit. Frozen blood pudding was a crucial food source in traditional Arctic communities, though it might make modern grocery shoppers a bit queasy. When hunters took down large animals like caribou, seals, or whales, they collected the blood. Not as some strange ritual, but because it contained essential nutrients that could mean the difference between life and death during harsh winters. Let's break down what frozen blood pudding actually was. After a successful hunt, people would carefully collect the animal's blood in containers. Nothing went to waste in environments where every calorie counted. The fresh blood would be mixed with fat, often from the same animal, and sometimes berries or other available ingredients for flavor and additional nutrients. It was basically a smoothie recipe that would definitely get you banned from opening a juice bar anywhere in the modern world. This mixture would then be poured into cleaned animal intestines or stomachs, tied off and left to freeze naturally in the cold Arctic air. Talk about organic packaging. No plastic, completely biodegradable, and comes with its own flavor enhancers. The nutritional value of blood pudding was impressive. Blood is extremely rich in iron and protein. 1 cup of animal blood contains approximately 20 grams of protein and nearly 4 times the iron found in the same amount of beef. During winter months when fresh food was scarce, these nutrients helped prevent anemia and malnutrition. If modern food labels existed back then, blood pudding would have been marketed as the original superfood, though the packaging might have been a tough sell at your local health food store. New extra bloody blood pudding, now with 50% more actual blood. The preparation methods varied slightly from region to region. Inuit communities often preferred their blood pudding with added fat and berries, while other groups mixed in organs like liver for an even greater nutritional punch. Nothing says gourmet quite like frozen blood with a liver garnish. Eating frozen blood pudding was straightforward. During the coldest months, people would simply chip off pieces of the frozen mixture and eat it as is, letting it melt in their mouths. During slightly warmer times, it might be thawed and heated in a stone pot over a fire. Many considered it a delicacy rather than just survival food. Young children were often given small pieces of blood pudding when they showed signs of tiredness or weakness, as elders recognized its revitalizing properties long before modern science explained the role of iron in preventing fatigue. Unlike the moss-stuffed meat bags we just discussed, which were all about preservation, blood pudding was valued primarily for its concentrated nutrition. It represented Arctic people's deep understanding of using every part of the animals they hunted. This complete use of available resources circled back nicely to our very first topic, dried fish, showing how these 10 staple foods formed a complete survival system perfected over countless generations.